Erin Paterson, The Mushroom Murderer. Part 7, Conclusion. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I've reviewed a considerable amount of evidence in relation to Erin Paterson and selected the most appropriate aspects for the purposes of a determination, which I've detailed in the earlier parts. For reasons of succinctness, I don't go through absolutely everything, as that would be far too time-consuming for me to create and for also you to listen to. Instead, I select the aspects which demonstrate the appropriate points to make. We now come to pull all of the strands together to determine what she is. We know that she has been convicted of murdering 3 relatives and attempting to murder a 4th by serving them a beef Wellington laced with death cap mushrooms. The fact is that she is a convicted murderer. It's also the case that there is evidence that she tried 3 times to harm or even kill her former husband. There is also suggested evidence of tampering with food when she was an air traffic controller and also when she was in remand in prison. The fact is, her conviction demonstrates an absence of emotional empathy. The question then becomes, was that absence of emotional empathy one whereby she has emotional empathy, but it has been reduced by an external stressor, for example, drugs, alcohol, loneliness, bereavement, illness, abuse? Or is she simply an individual devoid of emotional empathy? The occasions where she has behaved with an absence of emotional empathy are not supported by the presence of an external stressor. She calculatedly and in a premeditated fashion organized for the murder of 4 individuals. 3 died. She attempted to harm or murder her former husband. I do not see any evidence of an external stressor, which means that Erin Paterson is devoid of emotional empathy. Because that is the case, this means that we can automatically exclude her being an empath, normal, or even narcissistic, because those baseline qualifications require the presence of emotional empathy, and she has none. Accordingly, this then means that we are looking at, is she an individual that is somebody who is a narcissist, or a psychopath, or the blend of both, or perhaps something else where there is an absence of emotional empathy. She grew up in a reportedly stable but emotionally challenging environment, describing her childhood as akin to being brought up in a Russian orphanage where they don't touch babies. This clearly demonstrates a lack of emotional warmth. She claimed her mother, Heather Scudder, was a cold alcoholic who dominated her father, contributing to her low self-esteem and an alleged eating disorder, bulimia, although no actual medical evidence supported the latter accusation. She inherited significant wealth from her parents, including property and millions of dollars, indicating financial stability, but not necessarily emotional security. It is quite clear that Erin Paterson grew up in an environment where she was affected by the behavior of her mother, who may well have been a narcissist. This means that there was a risk that the genetic predisposition was passed on to her. Her description of her childhood also suggests that this would qualify as a lack of control environment, which increases the likelihood of her being found to be a narcissist. Patterson had a varied career as an accountant, air traffic controller, and animal welfare worker, where she met her estranged husband Simon Patterson. Described by her former husband as very intelligent and quite witty, she was also noted for struggling with depression and self-esteem issues. The issue of self-esteem, of course, is an interesting one in relation to the narcissist, with many people incorrectly assuming that narcissists have poor self-esteem. They don't. And the fact is that the level of confidence that they exhibit is such that they have a high conceit of themselves. However, certain narcissists, notably of the mid-range persuasion, will often talk about self-esteem issues because although they don't actually have any, they believe that they have, which is generated by their narcissism as a pity play. Their marriage, which produced 2 children, deteriorated by 2022 with tensions over finances, child support, and differing religious beliefs. Erin identified as an atheist, while Simon was a devout Baptist. Her relationship with her in-laws, Don and Gail Patterson, and Gail's sister and brother-in-law, Heather and Ian Wilkinson, appeared outwardly amicable, but was strained by underlying resentments, as evidenced by her critical Facebook messages. It is clear that she had a difficult relationship with her husband and also with other family members, and that with relation in particular to her career as an air traffic controller, she had difficult relationships with her colleagues. After all, they called her Scudder the Nutter. On July 29th, 2023, Patterson hosted a lunch serving beef Wellington containing death cap mushrooms to Don, Gail, Heather and Ian Wilkinson. All 4 fell critically ill, with Don, Gail and Heather dying within days, while Ian survived after weeks in hospital. Patterson claimed the mushrooms were accidentally included from her foraging hobby, but the prosecution argued she deliberately sourced and used death caps, supported by her lies about the mushroom's origin, disposal of a dehydrator, and refusal of medical treatment. No specific motive was presented by the prosecution, which was not actually required for conviction, which has left, of course, it open to speculation about the appropriate psychological drivers as to why she did what she did. There has been some suggestion that she did it in order to allow her to be seen to be the saviour, that she would induce a critical situation that she could then go and repair because she wanted the attention. This accords with what used to be called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Whilst this has been offered as an observation, there, first of all, is if that is correct, as I've explained in a separate video, many instances of Munchausen syndrome by proxy are actually narcissists engaging in creating harm in others, lack of emotional empathy, assertion of control, to then generate a response from third parties in order to receive fuel and assert control over them. Furthermore, I don't see that this was a situation where she sought to harm them with a view to helping them, because she did nothing to alert the medical authorities about the fact as to what they had eaten, and that she purposely chose to poison these individuals and do so in a way which caused them excruciating pain, something that I shall return to at a later juncture. I don't see that this was a situation of being both fire starter and fire fighter. It's clear from her behaviours that Patterson views herself as the central body, with other people being extensions of herself, which is a hallmark of narcissistic grandiosity. Her former colleague's description of her as managing to get guys wrapped around her little finger, despite being abrasive, suggests manipulative behaviour, often associated with narcissism. During the trial, Patterson's composed demeanour and repeated focus on how the case affected her life, for example, how difficult it was for her, indicate a self-centred perspective. I've mentioned her claims of low self-esteem and depression, but I see them as potential pity plays. Here, with more covert behaviours, she would regard herself as self-important, but would mask it with an image of insecurity, not a genuine insecurity, but one that is utilised potentially by narcissism to assert control and draw fuel to engender sympathy. She told repeated lies, which is demonstrative of an absence of emotional empathy. She told lies about having cancer to lure her guests to the lunch, which is demonstrative of perhaps seeking fuel. It's interesting that she was often referred to being as something of a loner, and that might go against somebody who would habitually receive fuel. But we know, for instance, she worked, and therefore her behaviour towards her colleagues was indicative of seeking provocations to what would be receiving attention, which could be fuel. That she was in a marriage, which went on for a number of years from dating through to that marriage and continued with interactions thereafter. So whilst it might be the case that she complained about being lonely, again, that would probably be more likely to be a pity play than actuality. Her meticulous presentation of the beef Wellington, described as a special meal, could well be seen as a desire to be seen as an exceptional host, to be seen as special. She had a me focus. She demonstrated no apparent concern for her hospitalised victims, even as they lay dying, demonstrative of the absence of emotional empathy. Her refusal to inform authorities about the possibility of death caps, instead lying about the mushroom source, supports this absence of emotional empathy and her self-centred nature. She claimed to love her in-laws like my own parents, but that is completely at odds with her behaviour and therefore was clearly an outright lie. She behaved in a totally arrogant, self-assured manner in her actions. She believed that she could deceive investigators. Her lies, such as claiming a gastric band surgery appointment at a clinic that didn't offer it, reflects a belief that she could control the narrative, demonstrative of the assertion of control and highly manipulative behaviours. Her disposal of the dehydrator and factory resetting devices demonstrates an entitled assumption of evading consequences, showing a sense of entitlement and lack of accountability. She engaged in compulsive lying, which is a manipulative behaviour, which is in line with the need to project a desired image. She also demonstrates a visceral response to perceived threats to control. For instance, the rejection which applied to her strained relationship with her in-laws. In 2022, she put Facebook messages expressing frustration. "I'm sick of this shit. I want nothing to do with them," which indicated resentment over their reluctance to mediate her financial disputes with Simon. It's likely that their refusal to assist her resulted in a threat to control, and that she had a disproportionate response, which caused her to respond with heated, ignited fury, and then organise a vengeful response by way of poisoning them. She exhibits self-centeredness, manipulative lying, a clear reaction to rejection. She is demonstrative of engaging in manipulative behaviours. It was clear that she couldn't process her divorce, which continued to generate a simmering loathing towards her estranged husband and family, which is demonstrative of repeated threats to control and a response. As mentioned in her Facebook messages, she stated, "I thought his parents would want to do the right thing, but fuck them." It's clear that she felt a justification in harming her family. This, again, is indicative of an absence of emotional empathy, whereby she knew that she was harming them, she knew that she intended to harm them, but she was justified in doing so because they were the problem. She directed her heated, ignited fury towards them. It is, as you know, that narcissists invariably respond to perceived slights with disproportionate vengeance as a means to restore their sense of control or superiority. The divorce and the financial disputes undoubtedly amounted to a sense of rejection, equating to threats to control. Furthermore, she viewed her in-laws as siding with her husband, causing them to be painted black. Furthermore, the inclusion of Heather and Ian Wilkinson, despite them not being directly involved in the dispute, demonstrates a widening of the concept of painting them black and was reflective of a broader vendetta against Simon's family. Remember that she wanted to hurt Simon because of his rejection of her and the rejection of mediating the financial circumstances, etc. And the fact is that by killing his family, even when he wasn't present, that would cause harm to him and hurt him, which would be a means of asserting control over him indirectly. It looks like she was seeking to target his support network, to get back at him, maybe furthermore to isolate him by removing his family, by killing them. It's also evident that her foraging hobby, documented since 2020 in research on death caps via iNaturalist, in 2022 indicated a fascination with mushrooms. There were photographs of death caps on her kitchen scales, and her use of a dehydrated process of them suggests deliberate engagement with the fungi. Her claim of tasting foraged mushrooms without illness, they tasted good and I didn't get sick, is either a lie or could reflect reckless experimentation. The fact is that she proceeded to harm the family of her estranged husband. She did nothing to assist them with regard to telling the medics what was wrong, and she also chose a method of death that was neither quick or painless, which suggests potential sadism on her part also. What is clear that with Erin Paterson, that she was exposed to a lack of control environment as a child, and it's evident that on the balance of probabilities, her mother was likely to be a narcissist, and therefore that increases the likelihood of the genetic predisposition being passed on to her daughter, combined with a lack of control environment. I believe that created a narcissist. She has exhibited a sense of entitlement with regard to the way that she picked people up and put them down, treating them as objects. It is demonstrative of her mindset, whereby she acted with a sense of entitlement. The way that she would issue orders and instructions, whereby she expected people to attend the lunch because she was the one that had organised it. That she showed also a belief that people should respond to her needs and requirements because she was special. She shows an absence of accountability as a consequence of repeated lying. The fact that she has no genuine friends. The fact that she was not accountable for good behaviour in the workplace in terms of her abrasive nature with colleagues, but also lying about hours worked. She didn't address relationship issues in a meaningful or constructive fashion. She was not someone that issued apologies. She exhibited some grandiosity by virtue of the fact that she thought that she was untouchable, that she could manipulate the narrative to evade law enforcement, that she was haughty and dismissive, arrogant, that she believed that she was always right, that she found people annoying. She engaged in a range of different manipulations. She showed a lack of boundary recognition by continuing to involve herself in the life of Simon Patterson after their divorce, that she continued to involve herself in the life of other people, despite the fact that they wanted her to leave them alone. She showed a variety of different aspects of the narcissistic dynamic by virtue of familial discord, treating others as an extension of self, black and white thinking, exhibiting a clear need to assert control, advancing a response to any threat to control, that she exhibited envy, that she showed a need for fuel, that she engaged in objectification, that she was clearly an individual that engaged in compartmentalization. She exhibited paranoia with regard to the perceived motives of those around her, that her behaviour, particularly as an air traffic controller, demonstrated particularly problematic behaviours. She was clearly an individual that exhibited self-importance. Everything revolved around how the incident had affected her, that she believed herself to be untouchable with regard to law enforcement. She had a belief that she was special, for instance, claiming that she could eat the mushrooms and they wouldn't affect her, that she required fuel. There was an excessive need for attention. She operated with a strong sense of entitlement. She expected favourable treatment and for people to automatically comply with her expectations. She's clearly interpersonally exploitative with regard to the way that she treated colleagues and the way that she treated her family. She has an absence of emotional empathy and was evidently envious of the relationship that Simon had with his family and how she sought to affect it. It was clearly the case that not only in her childhood there were the ingredients for the formation of a narcissist, but Erin Paterson has demonstrated throughout the evidence of her life and the criminal activity for which she's been convicted that she is a narcissist. She also demonstrates other traits where we might consider the presence of psychopathy. The fact is, again, there's an absence of remorse because she thought she'd done nothing wrong. That aligns with the psychopathic trait. The fact that she chose death caps as a method of gaining her vengeance exhibits a callousness that would also be seen with a psychopath. The use of death caps, which cause an awful way to die via organ failure and internal bleeding, suggests a deliberate intent to inflict suffering, which is a hallmark of callousness, but also exhibits a sadistic aspect. Her prior alleged attempts to poison Simon in 2022, requiring hospitalisation and bowel surgery, further support a pattern of calculated harm. Psychopathy, however, involves superficial charm and impulsivity. There is some degree of that shown by her, but not fully so. It's also the fact that her emotional distress during the trial is inconsistent with the cold detachment that one would see with primary psychopathy. And overall, I would see that while she does demonstrate some psychopathic traits, full-blown psychopathy is absent from this woman. The determination in relation to Erin Paterson, the mushroom murderer, is that she is a narcissist with some psychopathic traits. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.